Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, good choice.
You're welcome.
Mr. Speaker, Labor supported this bill into the Select Committee because we have for a long time recognised that we need to have, I guess, a more robust and certain system around the management of game animals in this country, and of course the protection of the conservation estate. The bill has been considered by the Select Committee, a number of changes made, and Labor at this point is not supporting the bill because, I guess in summary, this is an MMP bill, and it's really about a deal that's been done, a political deal, to push ahead something that in the end is not ideal and not truly fit for purpose. We do need to have protection of the conservation estate, and at a time when the government has squeezed funding for the Department of Conservation, it's little wonder that staunch conservationists are a little bit edgy and concerned and paranoid, some might say, that it's all going to be shifted on to the private sector, deals done in a partnership model, and then that we're going to shift control of pests and wild animals onto the hunters. And so they're a little bit paranoid about that, hence their concerns from what we've seen and certainly some of the SOPs that are coming up. Understandable perhaps. It comes down to a philosophical divide about what we have conservation and what we have public lands for in this country. We are talking about exotic animals. They have been introduced into the country, just as have trout been. For those fish, we have quite a robust system of protection that almost treats them as if they are an indigenous species. They are not. And we've accepted that as part of mainstream management for the good of New Zealand as a whole. So we're trying to establish a similar regime here. An independent game animal council is, I guess, in theory, a good thing, as long as it works in with the Department of Conservation. And this will establish a point of conflict, and there's debate about what that might mean. The elephant in the room, if you like, of course, is the one of 1080 and its use throughout the country. I come from the West Coast, an area that has been elephant in Sri Lanka. It will be here. It will be almost in the room soon. But can I say that when John Key comes back tomorrow, yes. Can I say, Mr. Speaker, back to the bill. I'm sorry, I've been distracted. Thank you. I'll be back on target. It's a philosophical divide about whether we should use 1080 or not to control possums. And coming from a region like the West Coast, we know that it is an essential tool to control not only tuberculosis or bovine tuberculosis in animals, but also to protect the spectacular national parks that we have. There has been, over time, some by-kill, if you like. By-catch or by-kill, that is when spreading the 1080, deer have been killed. Staunch conservationists think that's a great idea. Kill anything that's not native. However, the hunters think that they should have access to a recreational activity that gets them out in the bush, that keeps them fit, and that has been part and parcel of the New Zealand way of life. In fact, people have survived on eating venison. But if in the end the Game Council here were to stop the use of 1080, as the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment has alerted us to, then that is not progress. I've had an assurance from the hunting organisation, from Gary Ottman, that indeed that is not one of the things that the Game Animal Council would do, and I welcome that assurance. However, it is a contentious point in the hunting fraternity, and there have been changes to the 1080 bait put out there to try and minimise the by-kill, to not inadvertently kill or unnecessarily kill deer, but you still come back to the core philosophical debate about whether there should be deer or tahr or chamois in the conservation estate at all. There are SOPs up there that attempt to ensure there are no managed herds in any of the conservation estate or national parks. I don't quite accept that, because the reality for tahr and chamois is that they are often in national parks, and this is indeed where the objective of the bill will play out. So we either have them in national parks or we don't. The other reality we're dealing with in a Department of Conservation that is squeezed for resources, they will never be able to control or exterminate wild animals in the conservation estate, or indeed even in the areas of high natural values, Mr. Speaker. So there will be a reliance on hunters to assist in that control and, where necessary, extermination. But there are some double standards. Wilderness areas, for example, people are not able to use air access into wilderness areas for recreational purposes such as rafting or tramping, but they are for the control of wild animals. And if one were to be, very pure about it, we would say, well, you shouldn't have any air access at all. So there are, I guess, in summary, a number of slight contradictions across the whole of the conservation estate that have been put in place for best management purposes. The issue here is to ensure that if this bill proceeds, that we have a Game Animal Council that works in the best interest of conservation and the hunters, not exclusively one against the other. And so we do support that. As an aside, but one that will have an impact on the kind of recreational control that can occur, and that is, say, venison. We had a huge deer population in this country until the practice of farming and the value of the meat itself got to a level where people saw the economic driver to get out and kill deer. And indeed, that's what we needed to do to drive down the numbers, to actually see the restoration of a whole lot of natural values across the conservation estate. We were overrun with deer, there was a commercial value put on them, and we saw the extermination of them in some necessary areas. The fact is, the meat industry is dysfunctional and has lost and is leaving opportunities on the table all around the world, means that the value of venison is nowhere near where it should be. And if the government were to get on and sort out the meat industry and put a decent value on venison, I think we'd see real activity from the hunting fraternity to get out and help control deer. Mr. Speaker, Labor is not supporting the bill at this point, not because we don't want to support hunters to get out and enjoy the conservation estate and assist the department to control wild animals in areas, but because we think it's actually going to create some tension that will be ongoing between the department and the Game Animal Council. I am comforted by reassurances from Gary Ottman on behalf of the hunting sector that indeed they will do their best to work together, and I hope that that does indeed happen. But when it comes to the issue of 1080, as a West Coast MP and former dairy farmer, I'm staunch. We must be able to continue to use 1080 in the conservation estate to control the exotic pests that frequent there. It's not just deer, it's stoats, it's weasels, it's possums. We need to do that, otherwise the future of this country as an economic exporter of meat is at risk. Mr. Speaker, I welcome the opportunity to speak more on a number of particular technical issues in the bill through the committee stages, but can I say that Labor supports hunters. We want people to get out into the outdoors. We want them to help the Department of Conservation to kill unwanted pests. Anything they can hit, stoats would be great. That's a very challenging target, I'd have to say, but if we could have a bounty on them, that would be great. But in the issue of deer, chamois and tar, we need to ensure that there's appropriate control, but we protect the opportunities for people who do make a great effort to get out and hunt them. So we'll work through. We want the best outcome here. We're just concerned that perhaps the government hasn't got quite right in its proposals.
I call the honourable member Maggie Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise